Let's jump right into this explainer and act as medical detectives for a minute. We're going to dive into a totally terrifying mystery that played out on a luxury cruise ship. Picture this. It's April 2026. A ship leaves Ushuaia, Argentina with about 150 passengers and crew from 23 different countries. They're setting off on what is supposed to be the ultimate dream vacation to Antarctica and the remote islands of the South Atlantic. And, for the first few days, everything is picture perfect. People are mingling, hitting up parties, just soaking in the incredible journey. But completely unbeknownst to anyone on board, this trip was about to turn into an absolute nightmare.
In a matter of mere weeks, that dream vacation turned deadly. About 5 days in, a 70-year-old Dutch passenger comes down with a sudden fever, a terrible headache, and some mild diarrhea. Seems like a regular bug, right? Well, a few days later, he's literally gasping for air, and by April 11th, he tragically passed away right there on the ship. Nobody had a clue what was going on, so the ship just keeps sailing. On April 24th, it docks near Africa, and the man's grieving wife disembarks with his body. But get this, right before she's supposed to catch a flight from South Africa back to Amsterdam, she suddenly collapses. She died on April 26th. Meanwhile, back on that trapped ship, a German woman falls ill and passes away by May 2nd. 3 completely unexplained deaths. The passengers are now essentially stranded at sea because no country wants to let this ghost ship dock, and global health officials are just absolutely scrambling.
So on May 2nd, the World Health Organization gets the official call. They rush to run tests, and the final diagnosis absolutely floors international health officials. The culprit? Hantavirus. A notoriously deadly pathogen was just loose on a stranded ship in the middle of the ocean.
Section 1. What is hantavirus? The 70-year-old suspect.
Okay, so let's unpack exactly what this terrifying viral suspect actually is. The wildest part? Hantavirus isn't even a new threat. It's an entire family of viruses carried by rodents, specifically different species of rats. Scientists have actually known about it for roughly 70 years, and yet, despite 7 decades of modern medical breakthroughs, it is still notoriously incredibly difficult to treat.
And how it attacks you actually depends entirely on where in the world you are and what kind of rat is carrying it. It essentially has 2 distinct, horrific personalities. Over in Asia and Europe, it usually shows up as hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or HFRS. That version basically attacks the kidneys and causes massive internal bleeding. But if you're in North or South America, it manifests as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS. And in this version, the victim's lungs rapidly fill up with fluid. It causes severe breathing difficulties and ultimately suffocation.
But the absolute kicker here is its sheer lethality. This virus carries a staggering mortality rate of up to 50%. Literally, half of the people who catch it can die from it. To put that into perspective, that is unbelievably high. And what makes it even more unsettling is that right now, today, there are 0 FDA or WHO-approved vaccines. No magic pill, no proven antiviral cure. If you get infected, doctors can really only give you supportive care to kind of ease the symptoms, but at the end of the day, your own immune system has to fight that battle entirely on its own.
Section 2. Decades of deadly outbreaks, from war zones to the desert.
So, to figure out how this deadly pathogen managed to hitch a ride on a luxury cruise ship, we need to trace its steps and look at its historical crime scenes over the decades. The very first massive clue popped up back during the 1950s Korean War. American soldiers were fighting in South Korea when, out of nowhere, over 3,000 of them became violently ill. High fevers, splitting headaches, and ultimately kidney failure. About 15% of the infected soldiers died. Doctors at the time dubbed it Korean hemorrhagic fever, but honestly, they had 0 idea if it was a naturally occurring disease or some sort of chemical weapon. It took a full 30 years to solve that puzzle. Finally, in the 1980s, a South Korean virologist named Dr. Ho Wang Lee managed to link the illness to rats living near a local river. He ended up naming the virus after that exact river, the Hantan River.
But just when scientists thought they had it figured out, the story takes this massive, dramatic turn. Jump to May 1993. A brand new medical mystery strikes the Navajo Nation in the southwestern U.S. In just a matter of weeks, 10 people died. The burning question keeping medical investigators up at night was, why on earth were perfectly healthy young people suddenly suffocating? Their lungs were just rapidly filling with fluid. Early on, the mortality rate was a completely terrifying 75%. 3 out of every 4 infected people were dying, and scientists were, quite frankly, completely stumped.
Well, the massive breakthrough actually came from local tribal elders. They helped scientists piece together this incredibly fascinating ecological chain reaction, all based on the oral history of the Navajo people. You see, a massive El Niño weather pattern had brought some really heavy, unusual rainfall to the area. That extra rain, it caused a bumper crop of piñon pine nuts. And since those nuts are like an all-you-can-eat buffet for local rodents, the rat population absolutely exploded. More rats meant a way higher chance of the virus spreading, which ultimately led it to spill over into the human population. It was just this perfect, deadly storm.
And the thing is, we see this silent threat globally, far beyond just the Americas or Korea. Take a look at a major multi-institutional study conducted in India between 2005 and 2008. They found 28 confirmed cases right in the Vellore district of Tamil Nadu. These cases popped up among patients with chronic kidney disease, warehouse workers, and members of the Irula tribe, folks who actually catch rats for a living. When researchers went in and checked for antibodies in the general population there, they found them in about 4% of people. That basically proves the virus is out there, often spreading silently, quite literally anywhere rats are found.
Section 3. The Human Transmission Twist. Breaking the Rules.
Now, for decades, across all these different global outbreaks, the golden rule in the scientific community was strict and simple. You can only catch hantavirus directly from a rat. End of story. But in 1996, an outbreak down in southern Argentina completely shattered that assumption. Scientists identified the Andes virus. This is a very specific strain in the hantavirus family that holds a terrifying superpower. It is the absolute only strain ever documented that can jump directly from one human to another. Now, it does require a very close, prolonged physical contact. We're talking sharing a bed, closely nursing a sick person, or exchanging bodily fluids. But the terrifying fact remains, human-to-human spread is possible. Some infected people can even act as super spreaders.
And boom, that specific rule-breaking detail completely solves our 2026 cruise ship mystery. That ship from our opening story, it was struck by this exact Andes strain. So how did it get on board? Well, right before boarding the ship in Argentina, that 70-year-old Dutch couple went on a bird-watching tour and accidentally wandered into a rat-infested landfill. But here is the craziest twist of fate. This specific virus only has a transmission window of about 1 single day, super early in the illness. If that couple had boarded the ship just 2 days later, no one else would have been infected. But no, they boarded exactly during that incredibly narrow 24-hour window when they were highly contagious, passing it on to the other victims through close contact. By the time that ship was finally allowed to dock in Tenerife, Spain on May 10th, there were 10 confirmed cases, 3 tragic deaths, several frantic medical evacuations, and patients fighting for their lives in ICUs across South Africa, the Netherlands, and Switzerland.
Section 4. The next global pandemic. Assessing the risk.
So, looking at all that chaos, you're probably wondering what happens next. It is always the absolute most pressing question on everyone's mind whenever a deadly virus hits the headlines, right? Are we staring down the barrel of the next global pandemic? Well, the World Health Organization has actively evaluated this exact scenario.
And thankfully, it paints a very reassuring picture for us. The WHO explicitly states that the global risk is extremely low. Why? Because unlike COVID-19 or the flu, hantavirus is not airborne. You don't need some massive 14-day quarantine because its contagious window is incredibly short, literally just about a day. Plus, it requires highly intimate, prolonged physical contact to spread between humans. And here's a huge point. There has never been a single human-to-human transmission case recorded in Europe or Asia.
Section 5. How to protect yourself. Actionable prevention. But even with a low global pandemic risk, a 50% mortality rate means we absolutely have to take personal protection seriously, especially since weather phenomenons like El Niño are happening more frequently, which, as we saw earlier, can trigger explosive rat population growth. The really good news here is that you can easily protect yourself with some super basic, actionable hygiene. First, seal up any gaps in your home so rats literally can't get in. If you ever have to go into a dusty enclosed space, like a sketchy old warehouse or a storage room that's been closed up for months, just throw on an N95 mask and some gloves. The virus spreads heavily through rodent droppings, so you want to avoid breathing that dust in at all costs. And maybe most importantly, keep up strict food hygiene. Never leave your food exposed and make sure you're disposing of your garbage properly so you don't roll out the red carpet for rats in the first place.
At the end of the day, hantavirus is a silent threat. It really only grabs the headlines when multiple tragic deaths happen all at once, like on that stranded cruise ship. But the reality, it has been stalking humanity, quietly infecting people all over the world for decades. As we've seen throughout this explainer, without a vaccine or a magic cure, your absolute greatest weapon isn't found in a pharmacy, it's awareness. You are now fully armed with the knowledge of how it works and exactly how it spreads. You have the power to protect yourself and your family. So, taking a look at your own home and your daily habits, what precautions will you take today?